I am so deep in the throes of this medicine. And it was like, imagine 20 hours of experiencing the birth of every blood vessel in your body. Like, imagine 20 hours of going back in, deep in, through the birth of those blood vessels into the birth of the cosmos.
Psychedelics are said to shift our fixed perspectives, giving us a bird's eye view of our own lives and helping to remove the lenses of cultural, religious, and social conditioning through which we are taught to see the world. They are being used therapeutically and somatically to treat depression, addiction, PTSD, and trauma, and many are using them to explore the ineffable, those unknown realms of consciousness and beyond. Join us in Adventures of the Psyche as we learn how psychedelics have transformed people's lives. Hello friends, welcome to Adventures of the Psyche. Today we are joined by Dream Mullick, who tells the story of how ibogaine slowed her down to a turtle's pace to help her see just how fast she was moving to avoid being present with her own pain, and how this reconnection of self taught her how to honor herself. Dream Mullick is a writer, teacher, producer, and dreamer dedicated to the exploration and expansion of consciousness. After founding an ecologically conscious fair trade jewelry company, she was also the director of development and partnerships of the Good UN Foundation, Earth to Paris and Earth to Marrakesh campaigns. Her current work has her curating the live and virtual Entheowheel offerings at Eselen, a program that synergizes the worldviews of ceremony and science with sacred plant medicines and psychedelics. She is also the co-producer of Prescription X, a documentary on the life of Dr. Rick Doblin and his journey with the Multidisciplinary Association of Psychedelic Studies, MAPS, to legalize psychedelics as medicines.
I was born in India. I had grown up with a lot of early childhood trauma that extended for a really long time. Kind of lived between the two worlds. My parents were, one was East Indian, the other was Jewish American. They came through the line with a lot of trauma, so their capacity to be really well resourced just didn't exist. And so working with parents that didn't have the tools, bringing me in, experiencing a lot of early trauma, brought me to a place in my life, fast forward, where I'd spent my whole life working to kind of hold things together and unconsciously, but didn't really understand, hadn't had therapy or trauma work. So I had built my life up in a way where I had, built a company and was kind of the pillar and center of my community. And I was so busy doing. I was so busy doing that I was on constant overdrive, but really had no idea. I had no idea that that was even what was alive for me, what was happening. And yet, the universe kept showing me in different ways, that things weren't working. Things were falling apart, in all different ways. I was constantly in a series of very long relationships that were very enmeshed and entangled and codependent. I was, experiencing the pain of the collective as opposed to my own pain. There was just a constant way in which my life was being organized that to bring me back into looking for connection to myself. So I had gone deep into meditation at that time, and nothing was really working. And I was in this relationship, and my partner at the time was deep into alcohol. And so I started looking for alternative ways to work with alcoholism. And I discovered iboga. This was 2006. And so I started talking to my partner at the time about iboga, talking to him, and he was just completely disinterested. Until fast forward, it's 2012. And by then, we'd had a lot of experience, a lot of expansion, contraction. We'd gotten married, and he'd been in an accident, broken his back, had a brain injury. I was literally running on fumes. I was literally running on fumes and kind of at the end of my end. And so was he. And so he said yes to iboga. So we sold our cars and did whatever we could to get the money to go down to Mexico. but it was going to be just about him. Again, it was like that ongoing pattern of like putting others before self. I had been a mother since I was 2 years old. I had been given the responsibility of caretaking my brother after I had had another brother who had died. And then I was caretaking my mother. And so I was just in this like deeply embedded role of caretaking. So my dad dies, and I realize, oh, I'd love to explore this medicine as a way to process the death of my dad, you know? And so we create the space where we can both have this journey together. And I go down to Mexico, and the way that these guides work is incredible. It's not just a one-time sit or a 2 or 3 day sit. It was like a couple week commitment. And there was a building of a relationship with iboga, not just a fast track into the medicine. And so I began to, as I was building a relationship with this medicine, I was building a relationship with myself, is what, it was really what it was all about. And so I go into the bigger experience, or the lay down journey, or the peak experience. I am so deep in the throes of this medicine. And it was like, imagine 20 hours of experiencing the birth of every blood vessel in your body. Like imagine 20 hours of going back in, deep in, through the birth of those blood vessels into the birth of the cosmos. It was like a journey into my own soul, and it was a journey back into my own body. A journey back in through the inside of like the birth of every blood vessel. And it slowed down like that much, like my whole being slowed down that much. And so when I came out of this medicine, or came out of the experience, it didn't end. It was just the beginning. Like my body moved at the pace of a turtle, like literally moved at the pace of a turtle. My guides they'd never seen anything like that. And they'd sat with many, many, many people at that time. I mean, it took days before I could walk across the living room. Like it took days. And by a few days after the journey, we went out to go have a meal. And I am trying to walk across a courtyard. And I realized it would have taken me like 45 minutes. My husband came and picked me up and carried me. I was trying to figure out how I was going to get on the airplane. And so what I came to understand was like my system needed to slow down that much for me to get back into my body. Like I remember coming out and brushing my teeth, and it was like I'd never met my teeth before. It was like I was meeting myself anew for the first time. I heard the voice of my inner critic and began to understand like the harsh way that I had been connecting and communicating with myself, and there was so much blame and so much shame, and it was so confusing. To be this compassionate being and then be speaking with that internal voice and that dialogue. Like the gift that this medicine gave me was to really begin to re-enter into relationship with myself, and to begin to deepen in how to love and explore what it is to be alive and a human in this body, with all the different facets of myself that want to be expressed.
Thank you so much for sharing, Dream. Thank you. Yeah, your experience of doing resonates a lot for me as well. I found that a lot of my doing comes from a space of seeking external validation to feel that what I'm doing is worthy. And I think it's helpful to break down for people watching, how did slowing down create spaciousness and allow you to love yourself? Can you break down the steps? What would that actually look like?
I mean, iboga, in my journey, I remember it feeling almost like it was defragging me. You remember those old computer programs where it goes like tick, 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 and everything is kind of stacking up? That's what my physical and then embodied experience was. That I could actually stop for a minute and feel what was happening inside myself, that it was safe, and that I was a body, and that I wasn't just all out of my body, and that I wanted to live, and in choosing life, that meant that I needed to learn to feel all that I was feeling and experience what I was experiencing. And that really brought me back into this place of learning how to love myself. And it's an ongoing journey. You know, when we're acculturated and when we have so many traumatic experiences, and then when we're living in a trauma-based culture, like it's an ongoing practice to slow things down enough to allow myself permission and to create the conditions of safety to want to be in my body.
How has all that slowing down allowed you to expand?
Well, the slowing down, I mean, I'm going to say the slowing down is painful. The slowing down is painful. Like when I start to feel what's actually been in my body and in my system and what it has been to go so fast, like before the expansion often comes pain. You know, it's getting into my body and recognizing like, wow, what's stored here and what's stored here and what's stored here. It's painful. And at the same time, it's expansive because there's more breath. There's more room to breathe. There's more space to connect. Like I'm a prophetic dreamer. It's allowed me to receive the dreams. It allows me to be a channel for whatever it is that wants to come through. But first I have to get in, you know, in order to receive what's out, I need to get in. And that's a journey and a practice.
And how did your husband respond using the ibogaine for his alcoholism? How did that go?
That's a whole nother chapter and a whole nother story. But to give you really the high level, you know, I would say, I mean, we know this about psychedelics and sacred plant medicines. They're not a magic bullet, right? They're not, what they offer each of us is an invitation into deeper aspects of holding in of ourselves. And what I recognize is that my husband didn't want the iboga. I wanted the iboga for him. And so when we came back from the journey, you know, fast forward a year later, he died of an accidental pharmaceutical overdose. It was not the magic bullet that I was hoping for him. And at the same time, it was such a deep teacher for him, such a deep teacher, and allowed him, I believe, to die in a different way. In fact, it opened the doorway for exploration of impermanence and death and so much more work that I believe that I'm here to do, you know, or to be. Again, like there we go, right into the doing. Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing your story, Dream.
Thank you for having me.